Hi, I'm Erin Kent, and this is a tutorial to paint a watercolor cactus for Valentine's Day. My colors are brilliant red, magenta, white, viridian hue, violet, Payne's gray, and cerulean blue. Later I add ripe sienna and raw umber. Tape down your page to prevent buckling while it is wet. Okay, I am ready to get started. We're going to paint a watercolor cactus that is Valentine's themed. So it's going to be in the shape of a heart. For my tools, I have my very important paper towel. I have my palette set up with the colors I'll list in the video. And I have my paper, my watercolor paper taped down to my page so I can prevent any buckling that may happen if the page gets too saturated. I'm not going to pre-draw this one. I'm just going to go for it, and I hope that you will try the same. Okay, so now I'm going to wet my palette by transferring water to each of the wells where I put some color that I'm possibly going to use in this painting. Alright, so I am just going to dive in. I think I will start with the actual cactus and then I'll paint the pot around it. Okay, so we're going to do a heart-shaped cactus. I'm not familiar with different variety of cactus names, so maybe you'll know what type of cactus this is meant to be. Just kind of rounding out this heart shape. Okay. I'm going to take a wet brush with mostly just water in it, and I'm going to fill in this shape. Now I'm not bringing the heart shape to a point because this cactus is going to be sitting in a pot, so you need a little bit of a flat surface down here to connect the plant to the dirt. So you want your heart to be wet. So if it starts drying at the edge where you first laid down paint, just add a little more water to it. And you can adjust your shape at this point. It's a good time to do that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is drop in some fun color on my cactus. And let that bleed. And you can kind of keep going back into the same area that you added pigment and drop more, and it'll continue to push outward. Almost has like a tie-dye effect. Now I'm going to come in with just a touch of blue in the purple area. And then for my final touch, I would like to throw in some pink. Now the green has kind of gotten overtaken, so I'm going to get a little more green in there as well. And you just kind of let the paint do what it does. It's kind of, it's an experiment every time how how is this paint gonna blend? It's fun to watch that process. All right, so here I'm going to let this dry for the most part before I do the pot. But what we can do is do little nubs. Little cactus nubs. And let the color kind of bleed into that space too. And I'm going to keep that simple like that. And I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes and I'm ready to paint in some soil. And I've got some what's called a ripe sienna in my palette already, so I'm just going to use that. I'm going to create a pot. Outline. There. And I'm just going to make this a very shallow pot. Okay. So I'm going in with a drier brush on these darker areas, and I'm choosing this side to be where the shadow is. And I'm just doing some simple strokes. Nothing complicated. You can do your pot however you want it. Doesn't have to look just like mine. All right. Now I'm going to get a darker brown. Let's see, I think I'll do a burnt umber in my palette. And that will be like the actual dirt in the pot. Mixing that color with water. And then you don't want your brush to be too saturated because you're working in a small area and you don't want it to spill into what you've already painted. So just go in carefully to fill this area with your darker brown. And I'm not even touching the other colors that are there, just to prevent any unwanted bleeding. And you can go back in where you've already painted and add a little more pigment to darken it, or get a little bit of a texture effect maybe. You can also go in with that sienna color too. See how you like that. Okay, it's a little too wet. I'm going to take some of that pigment and water back. All right, I'm happy with that. And I'm also going to add a little shadow down here. So I'm basically just painting a line, and then I'm going to rinse my brush, let it stay wet, and then paint below. I need this shadow to go a little bit behind the pot too. So we're going to take the shadow back a bit over here. There we go. I'm going to go back in with more Payne's Gray on my brush and just tap in this area right under where the pot is, where the shadow would be the darkest. Okay. I'm also gonna fix this little gap here that I think is just too wide. Okay, that's better. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is take a wet brush and get some of the white, and we're going to make little dots all around. Try not to have too much fluid on your brush, or use a smaller brush that doesn't hold as much liquid is another choice. So I'm just going to do some random white dots. Now you can use gouache for this, or acrylic, to get a more saturated impact on the white, because this is just a watercolor white that's going to dry lighter than it looks right now. Won't be as noticeable once it's dry. All right, the next thing I want to do is take some of this magenta pink that we have in our palette and make what would be flowers. We're just going to do little hearts. big one. And yeah, I think that's cute. Shaping this one up a bit. Taking a little of the pigment out of the center of some of these hearts because they're just too saturated with color. I want them to have some light patches too. Okay. Kind of messed that one up, but that's okay. If you want to have a little more of a shadow underneath the edge of your pot, you could get some of that darker brown that we used on the soil. Gives you a little more of a shadow over there. Okay. All right, that's cute. And then you can also go back with the Payne's Gray and do another little area here since this is dry. Darken that up a bit more. One thing you can do with your brush is actually lift some of the color off or the excess water if you get your page or certain places too wet. So don't be afraid to use your brush like a removal tool as well as something to add with. There, now I'm satisfied with that one. I do want to take a little bit of the purple and create a shadow along this edge of the cactus. On the bottom. When you add shadows in, it really makes your painting come off the page, come alive. I'm not having a lot of paint on my brush because I don't want it, I just want it to be a faint shadow. And I may be going back over some of those white dots, but that's okay. You don't want to brush too hard on your page when you're doing this because you don't want to disturb the color underneath. You want this to go right on top. Right now I've got a little Payne's gray on my brush, and I just wanted to see what the effect would be. Just having a little bit of a darker shadow line down here on this cactus. I'm having a hard time transferring this paint. There we go. All right, nice. Just a little more shadow, doesn't hurt, it helps. Now the hearts, they look a little flat to me, so I'm gonna go back in with some more of the magenta on my brush. In fact, I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush, number 3, I think, no, 6, number 6 brush. And I'm going to go around the side, the same side that everything has a shadow on, down below, and create a shadow on these hearts. I feel like there's some empty space over here, so I'm just gonna drop a little heart down here, and it needs a shadow. Whoops, should let that dry. That's okay. I can come back to that. So I'm gonna go back with that Payne's gray and sharpen up some of these lines. Don't have to do that, it's just what I wanted to do. Okay, so the last step that we need to take, as long as everything is dry, we can make our little cactus spikes. You may want to go ahead and remove your tape for this part so that you can move your page around while you're working on these cactus spikes. You could really use any color in your palette to do this part, but I think let's do violet. I'm gonna get some more violet in my palette. And I'm not doing a super wet paint, so it has a little bit of a stronger color to it. All right. All right, so this is where you want to start turning your page, because that one looks a little wacky. Probably faster and more confident is better. So I'm just going back over and darkening some of these spikes. Ooh, they stand out a little better. Another choice you can make instead of using a brush, because it is kind of tricky, you can get a pen and you can use a white pen, or you can use a black pen, or if you happen to have other colored pens, you could use that as well to make your spikes instead of a brush. And that's going to wrap up our tutorial today. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and come back to see another video. You can find me on social media at Erin Kent Art or my website erinkentart.com.